So today we're talking about dealing with the loss of a loved one. And I've brought with me two people that have personally dealt with loss in their life. And first of all, we have Maureen Porter. And Maureen, you are part of the grief, or you lead the grief share here at Spring Hills. So you've got a couple different things that you do with that. Why don't you tell us just a small bit about yourself and your experience here at Spring Hills, how long you've been here, what your role is on these teams?
I lead Grief Share. I led it the last 3 seasons. Unfortunately, we had to take a break because of COVID this season, but we will get back to it in January. It's how to deal with the loss of any loss. I also am a Stephen minister. I've been at Spring Hills for 2.5 years. I came here from Silicon Valley, where I lived with my late husband. He was ill for 3 years, and during that time, I knew that he needed help. So I got him a therapist, and I got him a Stephen minister.
Oh.
And I myself...
what was the Stephen minister here at this church, or did you say it was a different church?
This was through Menlo Park Presbyterian Church,
okay.
The big church.
Yeah.
And so I got him a Stephen minister, and then I realized I need a Stephen minister. So for the 2 years before he passed away, I had a Stephen minister. He had one, and it was a tremendous asset to get us through that end-of-life process.
Yeah.
6 months after he passed away, I did the unthinkable. I packed up my house, I donated a lot of stuff, and I moved up here to Santa Rosa.
Why specifically Santa Rosa?
I have 2 sisters in the area and a longtime life friend that I've known for 50 years.
Oh, wow.
She's my chosen sister.
Okay.
And so when I was in the South Bay, I asked around, and people recommended Spring Hills because I'm accustomed to a big church.
Uh-huh.
I like a lot of action. I like resources. And
There's not a ton of big churches in this area either.
No, there are not. And so I feel like I hit the jackpot.
Oh, good.
I found the right match right off, and I have really enjoyed my experience here. And immediately I asked about Grief Share because I knew I still needed that resource. And I was told there wasn't one, and that the Grief Share leader, Paula, had been doing it for 15 years, and she didn't want to do it anymore. She was a little burnt out, and she said that she was also leading another group. So she said, why don't you take it over?
Oh.
So I went through Growth Track very quickly, and I was also told that I should go through the Stephen ministry training.
Yeah.
So by the time I moved here 3 months later, I'd gone to Growth Track, Stephen ministry training, and I was leading my own Grief Share group.
So you must have been part of one of the first Growth Track groups, because that's about the time we started it.
Yeah, perhaps.
Now, Caitlin and I, now the other guest here that I have with me today is my wife, Caitlin, who also has dealt with loss within her life. And I'll get to you in just a second. But yeah, so you came here 2.5 years ago. We were only here probably a couple months before that, because we came in 2017 as well. So you were early 2018?
I was spring of 2018.
Spring of 2018. Okay, so we had been here for a little over a year. But we're from the Modesto area, and we came up here not long. There's been a lot of people that have brought on the podcast that have that similar 2017-18. They came to the church, and a lot of what I hear is what got them plugged in is Growth Track, small groups, things like that. So it's really speaks a lot to those programs and how valuable they're, and Stephen ministry too as well. Absolutely. So Caitlin, I know you fairly well. You are my wife. We've been married for 8 years, going on 9. And yes, I do remember that number. She didn't have to tell me. But why don't you tell us about yourself, just a small bit about yourself. You have been on the podcast before, but it's been a while, right?
Yes, it has. So I, married to Garett. We've been here almost 4 years at Spring Hills. I have 2 little boys.
We have
2 little boys. Yeah. They're being watched right now.
Or as I just did the podcast the other day where some of the band interviewed me, and they said, "You have children?" And I said, "We have a little bit of children."
A little bit of children.
Say it that way.
So I'm also a photographer, and I've taken a slower pace on that lately just so I can homeschool the boys. And I'm thankful that I already had that mindset heading into COVID, but it sure affirms that.
Yeah.
I'm heading in the right direction to have them at home, and just to be able to teach them at our own pace and facilitate us being in ministry and working on the weekends. And I also work quite a bit on the weekends with photography. So yeah, just finding our groove in life. And my boys are 3 and 5, so they're busy, and I'm busy with them, and just finding things that we're passionate about. Like,
what teams are you on here? Do you serve on?
I'm on the creative team, so I'll take pictures on the weekends for the weekend services and baptisms.
So yeah, most of the pictures that you see on social media are taken either by you or Erica.
Yeah.
And then they get posted. So most of those pictures, that's Caitlin. That's who's behind one of those cameras that's taking some of those. which is cool. So yeah, and so I don't have to ask you more of the details about how long you've been here. You covered that already. But let's get to some of the stuff with dealing with the loss of a loved one. You both have had experience with this in your life, both in very different ways. So Kaitlyn, I know that you lost your father when you were young. And why don't you tell us some about that experience? Maybe tell us the story. So first of all, it was your father. How long ago was that?
So my dad passed away 17 years ago. And it was one of the questions I had made sure to ask, did your loved one pass away quickly? Was it all of a sudden? And then thankfully,
Kaitlyn did help me come up with it. Now, I am kind of interrupting you, but want to give you some credit here. Kaitlyn has dealt with this far more than I have in my life. So Kaitlyn actually helped me with these questions because she was so much better at understanding what would be good to ask. So yeah, you are largely credited with the production of this particular episode.
Yeah, so my dad was diagnosed with Gehrigs Disease in 2001. And so we all learned a lot about that disease heading into that season where we were going to help him, slowly, pass away with it because it's a terminal illness. And the other name for it is Lou Gehrig, who was the baseball player in the 40s or 50s that had it and obviously retired. And that disease got a lot more notable after that point and got probably a lot more funding and help with research. And then probably, I don't know if it was 6 years ago, the Ice Bucket Challenge went around. And so a lot of people know about Lou Gehrig's disease now because of that way. But it's a neurological disease that your fine motor neurons are hit and basically you become paralyzed and then you can't breathe and you can't eat. So just basically everything starts to deteriorate, but your mind still is there. And so unlike Huntington's disease, your mind starts to go as in dementia. It's kind of a couple of that. So we had hospice in our home and we had a church that supported us and, so many people sending meals for basically a year and a half to support my mom.
And it was your mom and your two sisters. Now your younger sister you were 13. Your younger sister was very young.
Mm-hmm. So my little sister was 4 years old when he passed away, just over 2 when he was diagnosed. So my mom had a 2-year-old, a 11-year-old, and then a 14, 15-year-old in the house at that point. So
when he was diagnosed.
When he was diagnosed. So, I mean, my goodness, if that just wasn't a train coming in through your home about that news. And yeah. Okay,
Maureen, why don't you tell us about your husband, Steve?
My husband, Steve, and I met in college.
I should clarify. Your husband, Steve, is your loved one that passed away. Now, you've lost a few loved ones.
Well, prior
so.
to losing my husband, I lost both parents within 4 months in 2010 and 2011. And I was my father's caretaker for 4 months before he passed away in my home in San Jose. So that was very, very difficult because we had to develop a certain amount of trust because I ended up having to basically change his diapers and feed him baby food. And he was a very strong blue-collar worker. And so this was, really hard. But we came to terms with it, and he felt that I had been the queen of everything to him at the end of his life. And it was actually the best gift in the world because I got a chance to be one-on-one with my dad.
A lot, probably.
A lot, where I didn't have that as much growing up. And so I'm incredibly grateful for that gift. And I held his hand, and I told him, go to heaven and be with Mama and Jesus, and he did. So, then Steve and I had some good years. And then in 2014, Steve came home, and he was a high-tech worker.
This is your husband?
My husband. He was a high-tech worker. He was in software sales. He was, we were, again, married 25 years together, 29 years. We met in college. We were absolutely perfect together. He comes home one day, and he says, I've got a lump on my leg. And I said, go right to the doctor. And he did. And within 2 weeks, he was diagnosed as terminal. He was 49. He was a real healthy kind of guy. He rode his bike all the time. He drank 1 beer a week. He was a health person, and he had never, I think, had more than an aspirin all of his life.
Oh, my goodness.
So this was like a total shock. And ironically, I had cancer as a child, and so we always expected that, my health would fail before him. And here we are with, right out of the gate, terminal cancer at 49.
Yeah, not even like hey, there's some treatment. We can see how things go.
Well, he took every treatment that they would give him. And let me tell you, Stanford has an amazing array of things they can do to prolong life, but it's about buying life.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire 3 years, he was only expected to live 11 years. He lived 3 years.
11 months, you said, right?
He was only expected, 11 months. He lived 3 years. It was the toughest 3 years. We had maybe one good week out of every other month where he felt well, because the treatment is so difficult, on your body. And so I lost him in October of 2017. So I'm heading into the 3-year anniversary. Third year is better than the second and first year. And yet it's still hard to go into that anniversary. It's just dates, but your heart still, feels the tug of the loss. So I'm doing well. I miss him terribly. He was a wonderful guy. He was very athletic. He loved to read. He loved God. He loved his country. He loved me. His family was, the most important thing in the world to him. He loved our 2 Chihuahuas more than anything.
What are the Chihuahuas' names?
Joe and Scooby.
Great names
and
for
they're
dogs.
Still around.
Okay.
They're 13. They're going to outlive me. I know it. And he loved, he loved life. He was a really amazing guy. He was in sales. He traveled all the time, and I never had to think twice about what he was doing. He'd call me from all over the United States and say, I found the best ice cream.
Did you ever get to travel with them?
Sometimes I did.
Okay, so you got to do some of the fun ice cream trips.
Yes.
Oh, good.
And then again, when he was not working, or he was, on vacation time, we traveled all over the place.
Yeah.
All over the country, So he'd say, if you want to do it, you make it happen. So we had a great marriage. It was a tremendous loss. And so now I've had to learn to be me, not we.
Us, yeah.
And the hardest thing about losing a spouse is the loss of or change in identity. You're now single. I didn't want to be single after 29 years. I wanted to be, married. And now I fill out documents, the ensuing documents and paperwork that goes on after the loss of a spouse is unbelievable. And I have to keep checking that box, widow. I hate that word, widow. It sounds like a horrible bug.
Like a black widow.
Like a black widow.
Like a spider, yeah.
I hate that. So I prefer to think of myself as a window.
A window, okay.
A window of opportunity. A window of positivity.
Good for you. That's awesome. That's a really good outlook.
I cannot let grief define me. The first couple years it does.
Yeah.
You feel like you are a widow. You feel the loss. You can't help but feel the identity change. But now at 3 years, I feel that I am becoming more me and less the widow.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Kaitlin, will you, so we learned a little bit about Steve being athletic and the things that he was into. What about Ryan, your dad, Ryan? Tell us about him a little bit.
Right. And it's just so interesting to hear different points of view of grief too, because it's like there's so many facets of it. The grief of a spouse versus a grief of a parent versus the grief of a child versus,
a sibling or a cousin.
And as I'm hearing you talk, it's like you're grieving what has been lost that you had. And so I think to introduce the subject of grieving a parent, you're introducing the loss of something that you never got to have. And so that is kind of what grieving a father is like. And so to talk about my dad, he was just like a lot like my husband, just like the biggest life, like I went with the Enneagram. It's helpful to know that Garett's a 7. Personality test. And so I'm like looking back at the kind of personality that my dad was, and I'm just like, he was a big old 7. Like just the joy, constantly going and moving. You can't take a break. This guy worked and just like loved life and just was so much fun.
And he was a roofer, right?
And he was a roofing contractor. And he
ironically from this area.
Right.
And then moved to Modesto, which then we came back to this area because you were born in Petaluma.
Right. So I was born in Petaluma. My mom and dad have this cute little love story. They met at Stinson Beach, and he threw Frisbee over to her to get to know her. And he proposed in like 3 days, and she like hold the horses here. Let's date for a while. They dated for a year, just real sweet though. But yeah, they met at Stinson Beach. They moved to Modesto in 1991. They raised me and my older sister there, had my little sister, and then Garett and I had the opportunity to come back to this area. So it's fun to kind of reconnect with his family, my dad's family, and kind of put locations to all the stories that
we got to go to
I had
Stinson
heard.
Beach.
So
yeah, that was kind of cool. And then your mom also came back here, and she was here for a few years
Mm-hmm.
recently, and then she just moved to Tennessee. But
Yeah. So,
yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some discussion here. So for those of you that might be listening to this that are dealing with the loss of a loved one, I also want to talk to those that might have a loved one that's terminally ill right now, because that's also, like you had mentioned, the years that he had been sick, Maureen, was very difficult. And Kaitlin, I'm sure with you guys as well. With your dad dealing with ALS. Those are both. Now, you had said ALS, but he was very young for ALS, right?
I don't know if it was measured by county or by state, but he had made some records with his diagnosis with ALS.
With how young he was and how quick it moved.
Yeah, so he was diagnosed when he was 40 years old, I believe. I'm trying to remember back. And yeah.
I think that's the number your mom usually, 39 or 40, somewhere around there. And then he had only, it was 18 months after he was diagnosed that he had passed. Yeah, so that's very, very fast moving as well, yeah. So I know that knowing that your loved one was saved is another thing. Both of you had spouses that were, now Maureen, you shared with me before this podcast that your husband was the director of your walk with Christ, right, as a couple. So knowing that your spouse was saved and that your dad was saved, what kind of peace did that give you, or how much help is that, knowing that they went to heaven, that they had a relationship with Christ, to be able to lean on that?
There's two kinds of loss. Ultimately, there's a lot of loss, but the way we handle it, there's anticipatory loss where you know they're sick and you know they're going to leave their body. Then there's the sudden loss, where you have to do a lot of the work afterwards. Anticipatory loss, you're doing a lot of the grief work before they pass away, and you're watching them struggle. And then when they do pass away, they're so changed usually from the person that, you knew, that there's a tremendous sense of relief.
They're not suffering anymore.
Exactly. I said to Steve, I said to my mom, I said to my dad, go and be with Jesus and be free of the pain, be free of your
this
illness.
Body, of this world, yeah.
You need a new body. Go and ask Jesus for a new life. And you're so grateful that they are out of their body and present with the Lord, that there's a tremendous amount of relief.
But does that make it any easier for you?
It does not, because the end result is still the same. They're in paradise. You're left here holding the bag. And it's painful. We don't like to be separated as humans. We don't like to be apart from our loved ones. And so then there's, all the grief of having to deal with life without our loved ones, our partner, our father. And so, the pain is the same. But as a Christian, there's a tremendous amount of gratitude. And so ultimately with grief, it's about balancing grief and gratitude. In the beginning, it's all grief all the time. And hopefully over time, the gratitude tempers the grief. And so you're not in as much pain. You know where they are, and you know that you're going to be reunited with your loved one.
That's so great that you brought that up, the balance of grief and gratitude, because not having any formal therapy, I didn't go to a therapist, and but it's these things that working this out in my walk with the Lord and reading His Word and just working these things out in my spirit, that I exchanged grief for gratitude, where I would lift myself up by saying, I am so thankful that my dad knew the Lord. I am so thankful that my dad prepared his whole family to endure this, tragedy that hit us. So that's definitely been something that is the exchange there.
And I can't thank my mom enough and my husband's mom for giving us the gift of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have to tell you, I know people through grief support groups outside of the church, and they believe in nothing, and they are in the most pain. People who don't believe there's anything after this life struggle with grief so much.
Mm-hmm. I talked to somebody fairly recently, and they asked that question. What do you believe happens to us after you die? And I was able to share with them what exactly my belief is through through God's Word, sharing with them what God says happens to us if we have a relationship with Christ, and why He sent Christ here to die for us. And it's definitely people that have lost somebody that don't know the Lord and don't know that if their spouse did or didn't, and don't even know what that means, right? They're searching. They're definitely searching. And if that is you out there listening to this, God sent His Son to die for you so you could have a relationship with Him, and that's what we're talking about is a relationship with God. And Kaitlin saying that you didn't go to a therapist, but you really how did you word it? You exchanged
just exchanging my grief
for gratitude.
And
thanking.
And that the fact that I can even have something to be thankful for is because God sent his son.
Yes.
And I wouldn't have any resurrection of the life if Christ hadn't come here, paid the penalty for our sins, and then gave us life through him.
And so your dad is with
it's like
God in heaven.
Our just belief in that is what does that. It's not any good works. It's nothing. It's just believing in the sacrifice.
And the gift is that you know that.
Yeah. A knowledge of
You
God.
have knowledge of it.
Yeah. Now, both of you had, in your experiences, had a loved one that was diagnosed with something, and there was a process to the passing away. So let's talk I'll ask this question as if I'm somebody dealing with that now. So like my loved one's been diagnosed and it only has a small amount of time left. How do I begin to figure out what to do with that time that we have left?
Well, it's mandated by treatment for sure. And, of course, continuing to go to church and deal with, the community in church absolutely helps tremendously. But, it takes time for a person that's very ill to come to terms with the loss. There's a grief that the ill person has to go through as well. And there were many times when my husband said, "Where is Jesus in all of this?" It's not like he was like understanding that this was a process and that he was planning on going to heaven. He would tell me all the time, "I'm walking with Jesus because I know this is borrowed time." And he felt very grateful that he could, acquire time from treatment. But, on the same hand, there was doubt in his mind about, is God present at all this? And I have to tell you, when you look in the rearview mirror at the experience that we had at the end of his life, God is so present in that experience. I can't even begin to tell you how many times I look back and I see the gifts that God gave us to take us through the end of his life. Steve Porter was working for Dell Computers, and he was there for 4 or 5 years. And he came home one day, 6 months before he was diagnosed with cancer, and he said, "I lost my job with Dell, but I have good news." And I'm like, "What is the good news?" He says, "I got a great big severance package, and I want you to remodel the kitchen that you've been wanting to remodel for 10 years.
Oh, what a gift.
And I'm like, "Oh, you sweet thing, thinking of me." And, despite the fact you lost your job with Dell, he says, "Maureen, you know me. I have a network. I will replace that job." And he did in 2 months. He had the best job after that. Mm-hmm. He got a job with another company. Mm-hmm. And then he got cancer. Mm-hmm. And, they kept him on the payroll for 3 years. And he only worked for 6 months.
Oh my goodness!
And so they paid him his base salary that we could live on.
That's a huge blessing.
That's a miracle.
That's a miracle.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. If he had been with Dell, we probably would have lost our home.
Yeah.
But the new company was a smaller company, and they were very human and very compassionate. And they kept him on his full salary, and they kept him fully insured.
That's amazing.
And out of that 3-year process, he only really worked for 6 months.
That's amazing. And it's like those times where your husband chose to believe in God's goodness in that time, and then to almost leverage it for even more blessing. And it's like that same sort of okay, no, God is here. If you can that's everything. If you're in the middle of your grief, you can say into the darkness and speak light, God's here, God is here. I believe it. It does everything to that situation. And then it just allows you to see what he's going to do next. But unbelief keeps you in the dark, and it's God can't work in unbelief. So that's huge that you have that story to.
Let me tell you the most moving thing that happened at the end of my husband's life. He had a concussion at home, and he was on hospice, and I couldn't keep him at home anymore.
This is while he was sick?
2 weeks before he died, he had fallen and he had a concussion. People from, with cancer usually don't die of cancer. They die of something something separate. So he fell and gave himself a concussion, and I realized I can't keep him in the house. And so he went to the hospital, and then for the last 4 days of his life, he was in a caretaking facility. I was there all the time with his mom and his brother, and he didn't talk anymore. He was separating from his body. And you can tell when you watch someone die, the process is 4 to 5 days. So he wasn't speaking anymore or eating. He was just kind of a head in a bed. But we were all around him, telling him we loved him. And at one point, the day before he died, he looked at his brother and he said, "Who has the keys to the kingdom?" And his brother said, "You do, Steve. They're in your pocket and you can use them anytime." Oh. And then he went into a coma and he died. Oh. And, so God came and got him.
Yeah. Wow.
Seriously. I'm glad you grabbed the tissues.
No kidding.
That's
yeah,
amazing.
Good thing we got the tissues here. I want to, there's a question that comes up, I'm sure, a lot with people that now we're talking to both of you who have dealt with the loss of a loved one, but I know that there could be somebody also listening that might be the one who is ill. And the big question from both sides could be why? Why would God allow this to happen? So Maureen, I know that since you lead the grief share, you've probably gotten that question quite a bit. Why would this be happening to my family? Why would this be happening to my loved one?
Well,
what do you say to somebody who's asking that question?
That is a very human thing to do, to ask why. There are no answers. Job never got answers.
Right.
We don't deserve answers. We'll always ask why, and we'll always say, this isn't fair. There's no fair card. It just happens. And I don't believe that Jesus is in heaven saying, well, you're going to get cancer, and you're going to have a heart attack, and you're going to have ALS. I don't believe it works like that. I think we're human, our bodies break down, and I think it's random. I think it just happens. Jesus is always there to pick up the pieces and support us through it. Jesus is the support system. He puts all kinds of people in our path and to support us, to help us. But Jesus, I don't think, gave my husband cancer. And Steve never believed that either. Absolutely not. Jesus, is there to support you. Steve's cancer was very much genetic.
But it's still so much of a surprise.
Yes, it was. But if you look back now, and I look at his family history, everybody dies of soft tissue cancer. His uncle died at 27 of melanoma. And all of his uncles, it's random on his mother's side of the family. So it wasn't really, if I look back now, a mystery that it happened.
Well, and I've done a lot of just soul searching into the curse of death. And that is God's grace for us to not have to continue here on this earth. And he gave us each other to, he gives us his son, in his body to help each other and to be extensions of that grace. So it's if we deserved to be separated from God and God came back for us and he redeemed us and restored us, it's death, where is your sting? And it's it hurts a lot. It still stings, but it's a grace when you can change your thought pattern to thank you, Lord, that we don't have to continue here on this earth forever and our days are numbered and we can use them and launch them into eternity, and that I have control here to do what I want with my days. So it helps launch you into at least a better thought pattern as to the graciousness of God and all of that.
Yeah. So, Maureen, I have this question for you as well. Most of these questions you can relate to it also, Kaitlin. But this one, just dealing with the fact that my loved one has passed away, having a hard time trusting God to get you through the grief process. What's some encouragement we could give to people that might be having an extra difficult time, or even just a difficult time dealing with the fact that they've lost a loved one, whether it was from a diagnosis that lasted a few years or something sudden?
Well, I know from experience that grief is not done well in isolation. Grief needs to be handled in community, because I'm going to tell you, if you run away from grief and you try to hide from grief,
it'll find you.
It'll find you. It will make you sick. Ultimately, it has to be dealt with and it has to be communicated. And so I see the best results in grief share groups. When people come and talk about the grief and repeat the loss every single week, because it has to be embedded in your brain. And it takes, I think, a full year to embed the reality of the loss in your brain. So I think that you have to really trust that speaking it out and being part of community will help you heal. I've had people in grief support that have not dealt with loss. In fact, I had one gentleman who had come to the group and he had lost his wife as a single parent, and he hadn't done any of the grief work at all for 10 years. And he came to me and he said, it's still there. And I said, you've never talked it out. He said, no, I had to hit the ground running with my little son and I didn't have time to do the grief work. And so he realized, if you don't do the work, it just embeds itself in your heart and it can make you sick. I have seen grief kill people.
Yeah. It's a crazy thing to think about it that way, because to think of dealing with anything for 10 years is anything that's remotely that I can't handle being down for a few days. I can't imagine 10 years of dealing with something or not dealing with it, I guess, and just letting it embed itself in you, as you put it.
Denial and avoidance is huge.
Yeah. Now, you've mentioned Grief Share now. We've talked about it a few times. We'll mention this again at the end, but also just right now, just in case someone doesn't make it to the end of the podcast, how do we get involved in Grief Share if this is something that I need in my life?
Grief Share is a small group, and it's advertised as a small group. We had to suspend it this particular season because of COVID and because of the air quality. We couldn't be inside, and so, we'd have to do it outside. Grief Share is a 13-week program. There's a video involved. There's a workbook involved, and it's the Christian way to handle grief.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm going to run it again in probably January. So if you're interested.
And then besides that, there's also Stephen Ministry, which you are a Stephen minister.
That's kind of
so that's something that if you're looking for somebody that can help you through, and you personally experienced someone helping you through your loss with a Stephen minister, right? So we have that here available at the church as well. You can contact Garett Ward, I believe, is the one, or John Barrett. And Steve Fiano, I think, are the ones that you would contact.
Yes, and that's the one-on-one mentoring of someone who's experienced a loss.
And there's an episode earlier on the podcast feed a few weeks, like a month ago or so, about Stephen ministry, like somewhere in the 20s, episode 22 or something like that, where John Barrett, Garett Ward came in and shared about Stephen ministry and what the purpose of it is, how to seek out a Stephen minister or become a Stephen minister if it's something that is on your heart to become a Stephen minister. I want to talk about what the Bible says about loss, whether it's a parent or a spouse. So what can I look in the Bible for and see what the Bible says?
The Bible says you're absent from your body and you're present with the Lord. And that has probably been one of the greatest comforts to me, as well as this app called Promises, Bible Promises.
Oh, okay.
It was brought to my attention that you can look at all kinds of different topics in here.
Oh.
And you can...
I see death right there.
Exactly. And so that has been a way that I have been able to look up different passages in the Bible to comfort myself.
Right.
One of my favorites is, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. That's Ecclesiastes 12:7.
Right. There's this verse, Kaitlyn, you wrote this verse down on our notes, 2 Corinthians 1:3-5 says, "Praise be to God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. For just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ, so also our comfort abounds through Christ."
Another scripture that I loved that I repeated to my husband constantly before we would go to bed would be John 14:2-4. "In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would not have told you. I'm going there to prepare a room for you, a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me, that you may also be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going."
That's so good.
That was very comforting to my husband and to me.
Yeah, just this further hope.
Yeah.
There's something more beyond this.
Yes.
This is not fun.
I have to tell you that being the survivor, I have found the world to be beautiful and chaotic all at the same time. And there are Sundays when I say to myself, Jesus, what am I doing here? And why can't I be in paradise? It looks a lot better than what I see down here with this COVID-ridden mess that we've got going and all the chaos in the world.
And the fires and chaos.
Chaos.
And the murder hornets.
Killer murder hornets.
So many things.
I'm just afraid to leave the house.
I know.
And yet I go out on my patio with my 2 dogs and I think, there is so much beauty and so much love.
He gave us so much.
And I'm here to do a job. I'm here to help people get through their loss. I'm here to encourage people that, it's not the end of the world when you lose a loved one. It seems like it, but there's always hope. Mm-hmm. And so I use my time to serve others as others served me when I was losing my husband.
Right.
Kaitlyn, go ahead.
Well, I just remembered, I can't remember if it was a podcast or a sermon I had listened to, but someone who had been a prisoner of war and, talking and interviewing that person, what got you through that? And it was just, that there was hope at the end of the story, and that he in turn after that, helped all these people with their grief. But the biggest part of that is just being able to help someone else with your experience, that you were switching your experience for someone else to be able to come through that same thing. So I think, 2,000 years ago, we didn't have any therapy or psychotherapy.
At least not how we know about it
right.
now, right?
And like just the beauty of God's word that spoke through
was the therapy.
Was, hey, you guys need to talk to each other and help one another. If you've gone through something and that someone else is going through it and they don't know how to handle it and you know how to handle it, go ahead and help them. Like that's going to help you and that's going to help them. And you're going to just find further healing in that process.
Does anybody ever know how to deal with it in the moment? Or is it, I mean, I would imagine, again, I did not experience this. So I would imagine that there might be some kind of like, well, I should be able to just figure this out on my own. I don't want to call it pride, but like just a determination to, no, I can handle this.
Oh, I always felt like I could handle this. I've had so much experience with loss.
Did you have to have a moment where you had to admit that, no, I need help?
Alone, I can do nothing without Jesus. I'm completely convinced that, I'm a goofball without Jesus.
I'm a goofball with Jesus.
I'm a goofball without. I've always known that I'm strong enough because Jesus makes me strong. I'm always, aware that I am not in this alone.
Mm-hmm.
And left to my own devices, I'll just mess everything up.
Yeah. Kaitlin, I had the thought here. We were talking. This wasn't on the notes, so I'm going to spring it on you. But with the loss of a loved one, someone in your family has been essentially broken, right? It's broken apart. It's not complete. Doesn't feel complete. What blended families, or Maureen, in your case, being a widow, dating again or not dating again, whatever the decision might be. Your mom, Kaitlin, was a bit younger, and she was, I think she was in her late 30s when your dad had passed away. And so we know that she had obviously dated again and got remarried. From your point of view as a kid, what's that process like, and how does a child deal with the idea of somebody else coming in and not replacing their parent, but coming alongside their mom or their dad and being a part of their family now, and how do they welcome that person in, or whatever the situation might be?
That's a great question, and I don't think anyone can quite execute it perfectly. They can only just walk in it in wisdom, and while it's a lot to sort through so I remember being 15 years old. My dad had passed away for 2 years at this point, and I just prayed for whoever would come into my mom's life. I knew that would come. I just prayed for this person, that they would be a great dad for Natalie, my little sister. And
who was
I just prayed for my heart,
because
I knew that was probably something that would be coming, and that just praying and just offering that to the Lord, being like, this is coming, please help me with this, and help me with knowing how to be a good daughter to this person. And it's just like all that you can do. And I think I'm a person that needs to prepare, so I like feeling prepared. And so just in God's grace, I had a dream when I was 6 that my dad and I were standing on a ledge, and he said, I have to jump this for you. And he was keeping me safe. And just, I felt always just in my spirit, just like something's gonna happen to my dad, and it's like, God is just so good to prepare you. And so I just at a really young age had always had this close relationship with the Lord, to be like, okay, you've got me, you got my family. And so he'd always had me kind of one step ahead of the curve of what was going to be coming. So I'd pray for my little sister, I'd pray for my mom, and just, life is still unfolding. It's still messy. It's still all of these things. And I'm still grieving. It's a lifelong process. And I'll grieve, my kids not having a grandpa. It's it's still there. And it's where the verse says that whatever you have lost for the sake of my kingdom, which it's anything that is here that you don't have, it's for the sake of his kingdom. When you know Christ and you are moving forward with him and you don't have something, it's I could put that under loss for the sake of the kingdom, right? So if, I don't have my dad, and it's he says he'll supply this much in this life and in the next life. So it's how can you, Lord, provide something that I don't have here in a dad? Can you give me a really great pastor? Or can you give me, these disciples, or, someone to look at, to be you're a great grandpa, or something like that. And Garett and he loves making lists. And so we made a grandpa list, your top 10 grandpas.
A fantasy grandpa list. Yeah. Who would be the best grandpa, number one?
It's just those ways that
I think Liam Neeson hit number one, right?
Yeah, his movie was taken. But it's just ways that God is unseen, and he provides in unseen ways. So I've always felt taken care of. God he's good at taking care of the widow and the orphan, And there's a verse that David, I don't know if David quite, I mean, I just assume all Psalms are David's. I know there's someone else's too. He gets the most credit for him. But when my father and mother forsake me, then the Lord will take care of me. And not that my mom's forsaken me, but like, you know, when you're grieving at 13 years old, you feel a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
So there's always a verse for it.
What's really cool about this, I'll share it. This is probably the only real input I have with this. And this is not something that I experienced in the moment because I didn't know your dad when, obviously, when I would have been 15 years old when you were going through that. But he wrote letters to you and your sisters. And there's a letter, I forget if it's in a book or if it's a letter that's, or if it's written on the book or if it's in the book and there's a letter. And he actually wrote it to me.
Right.
Not knowing it was going to be me.
Let me just go down the list.
Yeah, go ahead.
All the amazing things my dad did while he was passing away with ALS. So just keep in mind with ALS, you begin to lose your fine motor skills. And so you don't have the coordinations of walking and then your hands and then speaking ultimately. So he did so many things, just even with his, you know, lack of capabilities in that time. He made poems for all of his family members and had them framed. His best friend framed them for us and put them to pictures that were really beautiful. His best friend actually put pen to
paper, right?
He executed it. So my dad was able, at this point, he was, you know, in his hospice bed in our living room, but so he was able to speak the poems for each one of us, and, you know, his parents and his siblings and his, you know, his kids and his wife. And it's just the sweetest thing that we have this of our dad. And then he got books that were, you know, like a marriage book, you know, Finding the One. And he wrote in it to me. And then he also, you know, talked about, you know, this is for my son-in-law. And then like, so he passed away in January and he had flowers delivered to my mom in February. Like this, it's
the
just...
movie P.S. I Love You was basically based on his exploits, right?
Right.
So I was going to say that how much of an impact that your dad had on me, and I don't even know him. I had never met him. I feel like I do know him because I've heard so much of what he's like. But people have an impact on people in such a positive way. And I think we asked the question earlier as to why something like this can happen. And taking the road of your dad, where while he was sick, I think he had given some sermons, and he had done a lot of things where he was just basically shining Christ's love anywhere he went.
Right.
And he did that with his future son-in-law, who he had no idea what I'd be like. He didn't know you'd end up marrying a tatted up goofball. He had no clue. But the words that he says and he encourages me just helps me be motivated to do what he did and follow Christ and be a good husband and be a good father. And so he's had a huge impact on me, and I never even met the guy.
Yeah. So my dad being a roofing contractor, he, you know, I just think he had all these gifts that, you know, the last bit of his life he got to finally have an expression for, you know, whether that being like at his own lack of like jumping into them himself or just God's perfect timing to allow them to finally come forth. But, you know, he's really artistic and really good at writing and a really good speaker. And so he went around to churches and shared his testimony. And, you know, I think they're around these audios of them.
And he didn't grow up a Christian. He became a Christian later on in life. Both your mom and your dad did, yeah.
So he had done 7 years of BSF before that to like prepare for this point. So that being said, like something that I carry with me that like which is probably part of, you know, needing therapy or not, it's just processing it. You know, when you encounter such a grievous thing, you kind of think, when's the next one coming? You know, and especially for someone who's such a preparing type person.
Yeah.
And I think God's just worked on me to just enjoy life a little bit more and to just allow him to like fully hold the reins of like, hey, remember how much I like took care of you, and that if anything else is coming down the chute, don't worry. I've got that too.
And what's funny about your own personality is I feel like you actually are probably more of a, in the nicest way possible, mess before something actually happens and just being more like trying to prepare for the worst rather than when something actually happens, how composed you are in handling it. It's fairly fascinating to me to watch you navigate those things. But the question I started with was with the parent, with your family being broken apart. So I want to ask the same thing with Maureen, with you losing your spouse. What's it like to be, now maybe we'll ask a question as somebody who lost a spouse. Can you date again? Is it okay? How long do I wait? What's the protocol? If I have, like your mom, Kaitlyn, had young kids, how do I handle this? If I don't know this guy very well and I'm bringing him into my my house? Am I expecting my kids to love him and respect him? And it's just a complicated situation. So can you speak into that at all?
Well, first of all, I want to say you had an amazing father, Caitlin. Really. That's
a loaded question.
Question because, I am a new widow. Before my husband passed away, he struggled tremendously with leaving me on the planet. I will say that we planned for the worst, and the worst happened. We bought lots of life insurance. His job provided life insurance, and so he knew that I would be financially stable.
You wouldn't have to worry
and
about
safe, and I would never have to worry again. And he knew that I could afford to buy a house and own it, and I would never have to worry. Subsequently, he was worried about me remarrying, and he struggled for the last 6 months of his life with leaving me. And he said, I'm afraid that you're going to forget me, and I'm afraid that you're going to marry somebody, and we won't be together in eternity again. And I'm afraid that someone else will come in and take the life that I worked so hard to make happen. And so I packed him off to our pastor friend, and I said, you need to come to terms with this because I can't tell you that I may not marry again. I don't know how to tell the future. I said, but you need to get some comfort about, leaving me and going to paradise. So he goes and he meets with our dear, dear friend, our pastor, and the pastor did not give Steve the answer that he necessarily wanted to hear. The pastor said, Steve, marriage is not, it's a human concept. There's no concept of marriage in heaven. And so poor Steve, he came home and he's like, we're never going to be together in eternity again. And I said, that's not so.
There's also no sorrow in heaven.
I said, there's no tears, there's no pain. We will always be bonded. I said, we'll be bonded here on the planet. We'll be bonded in eternity. I said, maybe you should think that, it would be good if God sent me someone else. I know that might take time. And I have to say that there is no dating police after you become a widow. There are no books that say
it's only been 4 months.
I don't recommend making any big changes or dating anyone the first year, although I have known people that have replaced their spouse. There's a 75% divorce rate for people who marry within the first 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And so,
they're just not done grieving. You
don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
So
you need to grieve first.
You need to grieve first. You need to figure out who you are, and you need to come to terms with, what it is you want in another relationship. I am just now at that point where I think, yeah, I do want another relationship. I have no idea how it's going to happen, and I trust God will provide it. I don't see myself going on a dating site. Seems a little, I don't know. I would rather organically it happen in my life. However, it's not easy to meet people. I'm not working anymore. I lead grief support groups, and, I go to church here. And, so you hope that.
That's why God has you in a big church. It's a big pond.
You hope that.
I know some guys, Maureen, just if you.
Okay, this is turning into the dating game now.
That's your next podcast.
Coming up next week.
This is getting weird. I'm at the third year now where grief does not identify me. It does not define me anymore. I am me now, and I'm extremely happy, but I'm lonely. And so, I've had to come to terms with the fact that, okay, I'm in a new phase of my life, and I have an open heart, and I have an open mind, and come what may, I will see what happens.
Is there any sort of experience, maybe yourself or somebody that you know, that's dealt with the challenge of feeling guilty about moving on?
No, I haven't had anyone that I know of that has felt guilty, but I do know people that have moved on and had not given it enough time, and it hasn't been successful.
Yeah.
I do have a friend who's a psychologist, and she lost her husband in that sudden plane crash lost. And so she had to do a lot of the work afterwards. And so at 3 years, she said, I liked being married, and I'd like to be married again. So she knew exactly what she wanted. And she went online and she found someone, and now she's been married for 2 years, and she's incredibly happy.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
My grandma, my grandfather passed away when I was 2 months old, so he was fairly young. When I was younger, I always thought, well, he was an old guy, right? No, he wasn't an old guy. He was young, but he passed away from cancer, lung cancer. He was a smoker for a long time. And they'd been married. They had one of those stories where, they met 3 days later, he's proposing and they're getting married. And, just one of those crazy stories where they meet from across the country and drive across the country. And now they've got 4 kids. They stay married for, I think they're married for 37 years, 38 years, something like that. And when he passed away, now my grandma I'm her clone. She is just wants to have fun. Don't let me grieve. I don't want to be sad. So, and she just decided right from the start. She said, I was married for 35 years, 36 years, whatever it was, and I'm never going to do it again. And I'm okay with that. And I think her words, she always jokes around. My grandpa was a very old-fashioned kind of guy. The men do the outside work, the women do the inside work, that kind of thing. And she said, I'm never going to have a man tell me what to do again. I loved your grandfather. He was the most amazing man I've ever known, and I'm never going to let another man tell me what to do. And
she's had a lot of fun.
And now she has this group of friends. She is one of the most social, and sorry, Grandma, old ladies that I've ever seen in my life. And it's amazing to me that she has just decided this is what she's going to do. So her companionship came through girlfriends. Like, she just plays cards with them, and they go on trips together, and it's going to be different for everybody.
It is different for everybody, and everybody handles it differently. Last year, my husband and I had always planned on going to Europe, but with the high-tech world, there was never enough time. So last year, I said to my sisters, my 3 sisters and my chosen sister, let's run off.
Oh, I thought she was one of the 3. You said 3 sisters earlier.
I have 3 sisters, and then there's a 4th.
So you have 4 sisters.
Well, yeah.
The chosen. With
the chosen, yeah. So I said, let's all run off to Paris and London, and we did.
That's fun.
Awesome.
For 2 weeks.
Good for you.
Oh, that's so much fun.
I planned the whole thing. We had an incredible time. So I'm not sitting around being sad anymore, because my husband would not want that for me. I want to have fun. I want to enjoy life. I've got lots of years left.
Yeah. I want to ask one more question before we start to wrap up, and this is probably a little more lighthearted, but could be very difficult for some people. What do I do with the personal items that are left in the home now? Especially Maureen, you guys are married for how many years did you say? 29?
We were together 29, married for 25.
Married for 25. There's probably a lot of Steve around your house.
There was.
There was. Okay, so what's the grieving process there? Kaitlin, you can jump in on this too, because I know that we have your dad's Bible and a couple other his pocket watch and a couple little things, but we don't have much from your dad. And I think there's probably a difference of opinion on what you do with things, right? But it's you can't take it with you.
Well, and for your sake, you built a life with this person, and it takes a whole different take on what the stuff actually is. Where mine, I get to build a life with Garett, and these are more just mementos that I still have around that are a piece of that. It's like singular, but your life was so together.
Well, Steve and I, of course, accumulated a lot of stuff after 25 years.
As you do, yeah.
As you do. And so because I lost Steve over a period of 3 years, and I knew that I probably didn't want to stay in San Jose because I really didn't have any relatives down there. I started giving away his stuff. At his memorial, I had a very large memorial because, he'd still been a working kind of guy. So I had a big church memorial, and then I had a sit-down dinner for 60. And at that dinner, I gave away a lot of the things that Steve had collected. He loved fancy pens, wood pens, and he loved leather bracelets. And so I bagged up one for every one of the nieces and nephews, the 10 nieces and nephews. I gave a lot of his really good friends mementos. I donated all of his clothes, and I gave all of his sports memorabilia. Steve was a big baseball fan. He had 50 signed baseballs.
Oh, wow.
I gave them, and this is all 3 months after he died.
Steve is starting to sound more and more like the kind of guy I'd want to hang out with.
Oh,
just letting you know.
Steve was the all-American cool kind of guy.
I'll just let you know, when I get to heaven, I'm hanging out with Steve and Ryan. That's what's happening.
Steve was a fun guy. He was an all-American guy, and he loved baseball. And so he had a tremendous amount of sports memorabilia. He also loved Neil Diamond.
That's awesome.
I love Neil Diamond too.
He had framed pictures of Neil Diamond. I was kind of burnt out on Neil Diamond after 25 years. So his mom got the Neil Diamond memorabilia. And
Get that stuff out of here.
Yeah,
huh?
I'm done with it. And his brother
Sorry,
got
Neil.
all the sports.
Neil Diamond, if you are a listener, we apologize, but Maureen's had it.
Love you, Neil, but I've moved on. There are so many different stories about how people disseminate their stuff. They donate, they don't donate, they look at it for 2 years. I know people who have had the husband's bathrobe on the closet, hanging in the closet or hanging on the back of the bathroom door for 10 years. That's not me. I am and move on.
Is that okay, though?
Yeah, it's all okay. Again, there's no grief police, right?
Right.
There's no written word that says you have to keep things for a certain amount of time. I've known people that couldn't get rid of anything and couldn't change a thing.
And if you get
ever.
rid of it, don't feel guilty about it.
No, there is no guilt involved.
Right.
You have to come to terms with it, and you have to make the change when it makes you comfortable. I know a friend who cleared up everything after 2 years because she wanted the man cave for a guest room. And so then it became evident that there was a purpose for, changing what the man cave was. My husband's man cave, was sweet and I loved it, but I was moving away. And so I couldn't keep all of his stuff.
You weren't going to bring Neil with you.
I was not going to bring Neil and 50 signed baseballs and 50 baseball hats with me.
That's amazing.
I know.
That's amazing.
I kept the very significant things. I kept his wedding ring.
Oh, okay.
When he passed away, they asked me, do you want him to be cremated with his ring or do you want to keep it? And I said, I want to keep it, but I can't get it off. And the man that took him away said, you're not supposed to get it off. So they took it off and I took my ring off at the same time. And then I wear them around my neck when I need Steve's, ring around my neck. But there are so many different ways that people deal with personal things. And at some point, as Christians, we realize things are things.
Yeah, I think Kaitlyn, your mindset has been very much things are things. That's probably why there's not as much. Now you have a ring on your finger from me that your mom had given to me.
Yeah.
And said,
Did he tell you this story?
So no, I hadn't.
I noticed that.
Yeah. So there's the ring that you have is not it's not completely from your dad's ring, but it is a ring where the diamonds from the ring your dad gave. Maureen's, if you're listening to this, Maureen's like, let me see it. Show it. So the diamonds on this ring, this is very special to me too, because the diamonds are from the ring that her dad had given her mom right before the diagnosis. And then the rest of the ring, her mom and I designed together with the jeweler. So that's part of all of it, right? So, and then the wedding band.
Right. Well, and this is just the sort of like sweetness that God allows to be in the bitterness, like he just makes every effort, if you're looking and if you're ready for him to show up, he definitely shows up. So I was, I think 9 years old when my dad had told me the secret. And if you knew me at 9 years old, you don't tell me a secret because I don't keep secrets. I have a really hard time.
Kaitlyn is a very honest person, and that includes secrets.
I can't lie. Like
yes.
I don't.
If you ask her something and it's a secret, she will tell you.
Like I have no guile. Like I can't even try to pretend to hold something.
She can't surprise me with anything.
So I feel like I'm just being so deceptive, So, my dad took me along to Master's Touch Jewelers in Modesto, and he showed me the box that he was about to, give my mom for her birthday, March, and he was diagnosed in April. So this is all just very close, in my memory, it's like boom, boom, boom. So, the box had a light in it, and it was just bigger than anything I had ever seen anybody wearing at that point in my life. I'm just like, this thing is huge. Wow.
What kind of roofer are you, Dad?
So he gave this ring to my mom, and just so sweet. The fact that my mom would give this ring to me, it's just like,
well,
gosh,
technically she gave it to me to give to you. I'm just kidding.
The grief process, just also going into her shoes of her getting this ring back from the jewelers that was empty because they took the diamonds from it, and she got back emptiness, just
well, we have the
right, but
like
it's
ring,
not because now her daughter gets to have that memory and that peace, but just like I remember you telling
and
me
that was
about,
actually that was her idea was to take the diamonds and for her and I to go down to the jeweler together and pick out the ring that they were going to put them in. So, well, I want to ask one more question with basically resources, and I know I talked a little about this, and Maureen, you had mentioned you weren't sure what the name, I think it was the book you had said you were going to recommend, and Kaitlyn, you had told me don't voice this, just put a link to it, but we are going to have somewhere, we'll get a link going. We don't have this yet, but we'll get it get it working sometime soon here, of a list of resources for you. If you are somebody that is dealing with the loss of a loved one, if you're someone that, you look like you're about to say something, Maureen, go ahead.
I have a long list that I gave Kaitlin, and it's about grief and near-death books.
Okay.
And the top one is Grieving the Loss of Someone You Love by Raymond Kitsch and Lynn Brookside. And that book was given to me as a gift when I first became a widow, and she gave it to me, and she was also a widow.
Okay.
And that has been a tremendous asset. And so I recommend that.
Is it specifically for a widow?
No,
or is it? Okay.
It's just grieving the loss of someone you love.
Okay.
But it has been a tremendous asset. And so I highly recommend that one. But Caitlin's got a whole list here of books that I recommend to my grief share people.
Well, we'll make sure to get a link.
That.
Yeah, we'll get a link somewhere. I think Caitlin's going to work on that too. Caitlin's going to help me out a lot with the podcast, especially now that we're expanding to more topics. But if you are somebody dealing with loss of a loved one, or if you are possibly somebody who's been diagnosed, I know that the church is here for you. We don't want you to deal with that in isolation. There's grief share groups, Stephen ministers. You can come join us on the weekends or online if you're still not wanting to leave the house and being a little more cautious with the COVID-19 things. We are still have everything online, and Brett and the other guys who do some of the messages, they speak the same messages online as they do here live. So you're welcome to check that out. That's on YouTube. Also, the Spring Hills podcast is going to be doing a lot of these. This is not going to be a one-time deal. I think I mentioned to Maureen before, I want to tackle a lot of these tough questions. Podcast is not just going to be fun and games, right? We want to talk about felt needs, things that people are going through. So that's what our goal is now. We're going to keep expanding into this. So we did just do an episode on prayer that'll come out. This will be coming out on Monday, whatever the date is, this next Monday, the 19th, I believe. And then the prayer podcast will be the following Monday. And on Wednesdays right now, we have the story of Spring Hills, which is also really fun. We released the first episode this past Wednesday. I recorded the next episode with Brett and Eve yesterday, and it's entertaining. I mean, if you know Brett and Eve, whether you know them personally or if you've just seen them around on the church campus, they're entertaining as all get out. Like, I love talking with them, and I can see by the amount of listens that the episode of the story of Spring Hills is getting that it's one of the more popular ones. Yeah, so I'm excited to see what the next 3 episodes have with that too. But we'll also do more on small groups and on Stephen Ministry and all those things. So subscribe, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can also listen on the Spring Hills app. And if you don't have the Spring Hills app, you're going to know that I say the Spring Hills app. I say app a lot when I talk about it. Because I like to say the word app for some reason. So the Spring Hills app is at the App Store. That's the app that you want to download. And Maureen's pointing at it right now. And I don't know if you know this, Maureen, but if you go down here and click on media and you say listen, that's exactly where the podcast is. So you can listen to the podcast there.
Learning something new.
Yes,
awesome.
It is. It's a little hidden on there, but it is there.
Good to know.
Yeah, there's some cool things on there, and we're going to keep going. Now, also, I'm hoping that this video, I'm filming it right now, but I don't know if it's going to work. Last time I filmed it, I messed it up. So we're hoping to make this a video podcast now too, which will be, at first, it'll be on YouTube. So I'll make sure that we let everybody know about that as well. But thank you, Kaitlin and Maureen, for coming down. We'll have you on again soon to talk more, some of the grief, and Maureen, also Stephen Ministry, and just other topics that you guys can have some input in, because we want to be here for our church family. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Anything else?
Thank you. Amen.
Amen. Great. All right. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.